Once upon a time, there were two little boys, Jimmy and Johnny, and Jimmy and Johnny were in kindergarten, and, well, they were a little bit mischievous around the classroom, and the teacher got a little bit sick and tired of that. So one day, Jimmy and Johnny are talking to each other, and the teacher cries from the front of the classroom, "Jimmy, Johnny, if you speak out of turn again, I'm going to send you to the principal's office." Now, Jimmy and Johnny are in the middle of this huge school. They don't even know where the principal's office is, but they know that the principal is a man to be feared. So Jimmy and Johnny, they behave themselves for 5 or 6 minutes, but after that, Jimmy turns to Johnny, begins speaking again while the teacher's trying to teach, and another cry from the front of the classroom, "Jimmy, Johnny, come here." So Jimmy and Johnny get up out of their chairs, and they walk towards the front of the classroom, and they stand in front of the teacher's desk, and the teacher looks at Jimmy, and the teacher looks at Johnny. The teacher says, "Didn't I tell you if you spoke out of turn again, I'd send you to the principal's office?" And Jimmy and Johnny both nod. Teacher says, "Well, go to the principal's office." So Jimmy and Johnny, they walk out of the classroom, and then they look at each other, not even knowing where the principal's office is. They're in the middle of this huge school. They begin to wander around the school in search of the principal's office. The teacher, she gets on the phone in the classroom. She calls the principal's secretary and says, "Listen, I've just sent these two kids down from kindergarten. Would you ask the principal just to scare them a little bit and then send them back to class?" So after asking 4 or 5 people for directions, Jimmy and Johnny finally find the principal's office, and the secretary invites them to sit in 2 enormous leather chairs opposite a very large wooden door which says "Principal." And as Jimmy and Johnny sit down in the chairs, Jimmy turns to Johnny and says, "What are we going to tell him?" Johnny says, "I don't know, but we better make sure we tell him the same thing." And with that, the door opens, and out steps the principal. The principal looks at Jimmy and then at Johnny. Then he points at Jimmy and says, "Come with me." So Jimmy disappears in behind this enormous wooden door. The door closes. The principal invites Jimmy to sit in another enormous chair opposite a very large desk, on the other side of which sits the principal. The principal looks at Jimmy and says, "Jimmy, your teacher tells me you've been misbehaving in class, speaking out of turn, speaking while she's trying to teach, and generally causing mischief and distractions in the classroom. But tell me one thing, Jimmy, where is God?" Where is God? Jimmy thought to himself. You see, Jimmy was expecting questions. He was expecting the principal to ask some questions, but he wasn't expecting this question. All of a sudden, he became very nervous, very anxious. He began to sweat a little bit, began to shake a little bit, and began to go very pale. And finally, he spoke up, saying to the principal, "Mr. Principal, I'm really sorry for misbehaving in class, and I'm sorry for speaking out of turn, and I'm sorry for speaking while the teacher was trying to teach. Mr. Principal, I'm really sorry for misbehaving. I don't know where God is, Mr. Principal, but if you let me go right now, I promise you I'll never misbehave in class ever again." Principal says, "Very well, Jimmy. Send Johnny in to see me." So Jimmy gets up out of his chair, he walks towards the door, he opens the door, and when he opens the door, Johnny looks at Jimmy. Jimmy is as white as a ghost. He is sweating and shaking like nothing Johnny has ever seen. He says to Jimmy, "Jimmy, what happened in there?" Jimmy says, "Somebody's stolen God and they think we did it." Over the last several days, we've been talking about our quest for happiness, the deep desire we have, the yearning we have in each of us to be happy. And I think that most of us know in some deep place that ultimately our happiness comes from walking the way that God has designed, created, destined for each of us to walk. But in our modern culture, we have complicated everything, including our quest to know God's will and do God's will. Paul Simon, in his song "Slip Sliding Away," wrote, "God only knows, God makes his plans, the information's unavailable to mortal man. We work our jobs, collect our pay, believe we're gliding down the highway, but in fact, we're slip sliding away." A rather cynical view which really reflects the view society has of God, his will, his design for each of our lives. We believe in this moment in history that it's out of reach, that it's unattainable, that it's not something we could know. And in fact, nothing could be further from the truth. You see, God is screaming at you what he wants you to do so loud. God is screaming at us what he wants us to do so loud, we just don't listen. We just don't listen. We spoke the other night about this point A, point B reality. At point A, the person we are right now, strengths, weaknesses, faults, failings, flaws, defects, talents, abilities. And the key to making this journey is to listening to God's voice in our lives. To listening to God's voice in our lives.
For thousands of years, God has been speaking to humanity. In every place, in every time, in every culture, people have stories about how God has spoken to them. Throughout the history of humanity, God has been speaking to us, encouraging us to choose happiness, encouraging us to celebrate and embrace the best version of ourselves. It isn't that all of a sudden God has stopped speaking to us. It is that all of a sudden we have stopped listening.
How does he speak to us? Well, very rarely do the clouds part and the thunderous voice come booming down to us here on earth. Mostly he speaks to us in very ordinary ways. But every single day, God speaks to you and he speaks to me in three very clear, distinct voices. The first voice of God is the voice of legitimate need. The voice of legitimate need. You and I, human beings, we have legitimate needs in the four areas we've been speaking about: physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual. Physically, if you don't eat, you will die. You have a legitimate need for food. Physically, if you don't eat, you will die. You have a legitimate need for food. And we have legitimate needs in each of the four areas: physically, emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. Who gave us this need to eat, this need to drink? Who gave us this legitimate need? God gave us this need. And so when we hear this need calling out to us, whose voice do we hear? We hear the voice of God. When we hear our legitimate needs, physically, emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually, calling out to us, we hear the voice of legitimate need. But most of us don't even have the foggiest idea what our legitimate needs are. Most of us don't even have the foggiest idea what our legitimate needs are, because our culture, our world, and our lives are almost completely focused on our illegitimate wants. We spend most of our time, most of our energy, focused and chasing our illegitimate wants. We think that if we can have more of these things that we want, that then we'll find happiness, that then we'll find peace in our hearts, in our lives. And so we chase, and we chase these illegitimate wants, all the time ignoring our legitimate needs, which are in fact the key to the balance and the happiness that we desire and that God desires for us. Illegitimate wants, illegitimate desires. Funny thing is, you never can get enough of what you don't really need. You never can get enough of what you don't really need. And we keep chasing these things that we have no need for. We have no need for. We keep filling our lives with these things that we have no need for. They're just the fruit of our illegitimate desires, of our illegitimate wants. And all the time, the voice of God calling out to us, gently, ever so gently, calling us to attend to our legitimate needs, physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. Do you know what your legitimate needs are? Do you know what your legitimate needs are? Physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. How do we discover what they are? Well, only by listening to that gentle voice within us. How do we discover that gentle voice again in our lives? Like we spoke about yesterday, only by stepping into the classroom of silence, becoming reconnected with ourselves and reconnected with our God. By stepping back from the hustle and bustle of life, the day-to-day drudgery of life, to become reconnected with ourselves, reconnected with our God, so that we can hear that voice of legitimate need in our lives. So we can begin to focus on our legitimate needs, so that we can begin to identify our legitimate needs, physically, emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually, so that we can begin to fulfill those legitimate needs in our lives and see the ways that God is calling us to fulfill those legitimate needs. God is always speaking to us, screaming at us so loud what he wants us to do and what he wants for us, we just won't listen. The first voice, the voice of legitimate need. The second voice, the voice of talent. We're all created individually, uniquely. We have many different needs and many different talents, many different gifts, many different abilities. Do you know what yours are? Do you know what your talents, your gifts, your abilities are? Are you using them in your life? Are you using them in your life? Because when we hear the voice of talent calling us forth, when we hear the voice of talent calling us forth, whose voice do we hear? The voice of God. Why? Because it is he that has given us these talents, these gifts, these abilities. God always calling out to us, always calling out to us. Second voice he uses to call us along the path. The second voice he uses to call us on the path to become the best version of ourselves. The voice of talent. And finally, the third voice of God is the voice of deepest desire. You have desires, I have desires. Some of them shallow, but part of the journey of the soul, part of the adventure of salvation, is working out what our desires are and going beyond the shallow desires in our lives and in our hearts to the deepest desires in our hearts. Because it is God that has placed those deepest desires in our hearts. Those deep, deep desires for good things were placed there by God to help us make the journey, to call us along the path, to help us become the best version of ourselves. Do you know what your deepest desires are? Do you know what your deepest desires are? For myself, every day at about lunchtime, I have a desire for 6 double chocolate donuts. It's not a particularly deep desire. It's not a particularly deep desire. But the only way for me to say no to that shallow desire is to have a deeper yes. Do you know what your deeper yeses are in your life? Do you have deeper yeses in your life? The only way to come to them, once again, is to step out of the crazy, noisy, busy world, to step into the classroom of silence, to get reconnected with yourself, reconnected with your God, to get a sense of who you are and what your deep desires are. Because those desires, placed there by God. Placed there by God. They are the keys, they are the map to this journey for you. The 3 voices of God, the voice of legitimate need, the voice of talent, and the voice of deepest desire. All designed to draw us along this path. All designed to draw us from the person we are today, strengths, weaknesses, faults, failings, flaws, defects, talents, abilities. All designed to draw us from the person we are today to the person we're capable of becoming, to the best version of ourselves. To the best version of ourselves. We're on a quest for happiness. We're on a quest for happiness. And sadly, we know it best when we're children. When we're little, young, 4, 5, 6 years old, we hear this voice within us. We live by what we hear. So we're very, very happy. We're very, very happy. We all have this voice within us. Yes or yes? We all have this voice within us. Call it conscience. Call it whatever you wish to call it. We all have this voice within us. When we're children, we hear this voice with great clarity. We listen to the voice. We live by what we hear. And so we are very, very happy. But as we begin to grow a little older, we become aware of all the voices that surround us. Voices of parents, voices of siblings, voices on television, voices at school. And as we become aware of all these other voices around us, we begin to doubt that voice within us. We begin to question that voice within us. And we begin to live by all these other voices. And we begin to doubt and question and ignore that voice deep within us. It grows fainter and fainter and fainter. And then, when we can hardly hear that voice anymore, then they tell us we've grown up. Then they tell us we're adults. Then they tell us we're ready for life. And nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing could be further from the truth. If we're to make this journey from the person we are, point A, from the person we are to the person we were created to be, the best version of ourselves, we have to learn to hear that voice within us again. We have to learn to listen to that gentle voice within us again and to live by what we hear. And as we begin to listen to that voice again, and as we begin to live by that voice again, it will grow stronger and stronger. And it will begin to drown those other voices out around us. And we'll begin to have the confidence in that voice that we need to make the journey that God has created just for you, just for me. We're on a quest for happiness. We're on a quest for happiness. And to think that we can find this happiness by becoming some second-rate version of our friends, or some second-rate version of our parents, or some second-rate version of ourselves is a fantasy. The only way is for us to create a vision of the best version of ourselves, of all we are capable of being, of all we are capable of becoming, and to reach out and strive to become all we can be.
We all have this voice within us, this gentle voice within us. Call it conscience. Call it whatever you want to call it. But let me ask you, when was the last time you lived by that voice within you and it led you to a place of misery? Never. It doesn't happen. That voice is always leading you to become the best version of yourself. That voice is always encouraging you to reach out and grasp at the best version of yourself. So why have we begun to listen to all these so-called experts around us and begun to question and doubt and ignore that gentle voice within us which never leads us astray? You know what that voice is? It's the voice of the best version of yourself talking to you.
We look at the 4 areas of life: physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual. As we discussed a couple of days ago, we know the things that bring us happiness. Physically, you eat the right sorts of food, you sleep regularly, you exercise regularly, you feel happier, you're healthier, you feel more fully alive, and you have a richer, more abundant experience of life. Emotionally, you give focus to your relationships, you're healthier, you're happier. Intellectually, you take a few moments each day to read good books. You become more focused, more alert, more vibrant, more vital. You have a richer, more abundant experience of life. And spiritually, you take a few moments each day to step into the classroom of silence, to sit down with your God, to get reconnected with self, reconnected with God. What happens? Sense of peace, sense of purpose, sense of direction in our lives. We're healthier, we're happier. Physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, we know the things that make us happy. We just don't do them. It's not that God doesn't want us to be happy. It's not that God is trying to make us all miserable down here. We know the things that bring us happiness. We just don't do them. Physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. That's the great disconnect of the human experience. On one hand, we all want to be happy. On the other hand, we all know the things that bring us happiness. We just don't do those things. Why? Because we're too busy. We're just too busy, you know? Physically, we don't exercise regularly. Why? Because we're too busy. We don't eat the right sorts of food. Why? Because they take too long to prepare. It's too easy to go through the drive-thru, and we're too busy. We don't sleep regularly. Why? Because there's still only 24 hours in the day. We just get more and more behind every day. We never feel like we catch up. There's just more on our to-do list every day when we wake up. So we don't sleep regularly. Why? Because we're too busy. Emotionally, every single person here today knows that the happiest people on the planet Earth are the people who are focused in their relationships. It's not a secret. The happiest people on the planet are the people who are focused in their relationships. But do we give priority to our relationships? Do we give priority to our relationships? No. We cram our relationships into little periods of time, tell ourselves, oh, it's quality time. Quality time. Why? Because we're too busy. We're too busy. Let me tell you, relationships thrive under one condition: carefree timelessness. You've got a relationship in your life that's struggling, you want it to thrive, you want it to blossom. Gift that relationship with one thing, one ingredient: carefree timelessness. Every relationship thrives under the conditions of carefree timelessness. Why do young people fall in love so easily? Why do young people fall in love so easily? I mean, teenagers, what do? They talk on the phone, yes or yes? They talk on the phone. How long do they talk on the phone for? Forever. Forever. So Johnny's on the phone to his girlfriend, Susan. They're on the phone for 4 hours. Johnny gets off the phone. You say to Johnny, what did you guys talk about? What does Johnny say? Nothing. Carefree timelessness. Carefree timelessness. Every single person knows that the happiest people on the planet are the people who are focused in their relationships. Relationships thrive under one condition: carefree timelessness. But do we gift our relationships with this carefree timelessness? No. Why? Oh, we're too busy. Intellectually, we know if we took 10 minutes a day to read a good book, not 2 hours a day, 10 minutes a day to read a good book, one of those books that challenges you to become the best version of yourself, what would happen? We become more focused, more alert, more vibrant, more vital. We'll be healthier, we'll be happier. But we don't take that 10 minutes, do we? Why? Oh, we're too busy. And spiritually, we know that if we took that time in the silence, We know our souls need silence. We know our souls need silence like our bodies need air to breathe and water to drink. Why don't we take that silence? Oh, we're too busy.
If you died today, how would you feel about the life you've lived? I mean, if you had to stand before God today and justify the way you've spent your life, how would you do? I mean, life is short, and none of us are promised tomorrow. Are you doing what really matters? Do the people who you really love, the people you love and care about the most, do they know how much you love them? Are you living a life worthy of this great gift we call life? And, I mean, when you're gone, how would you like to be remembered? What sort of a legacy are you leaving behind? Will this world be a better place because you've lived?
Too busy. So there it is. We all want to be happy. We all know the things that make us happy. We just don't do them. Why? Because we're too busy. Begs the question, doesn't it? It begs, what are we too busy doing? What are we too, well, I'll tell you. We're too busy doing just about everything that means just about nothing to just about nobody, just about anywhere, and will mean even less to anyone 100 years from now. It makes perfect sense, doesn't it? We all want to be happy, we all know the things that make us happy, but we don't do those things because we're too busy doing just about everything that means just about nothing to just about nobody, just about anywhere, and will mean even less to anyone 100 years from now. We're too busy wasting our lives. We're too busy caught up in Thoreau's masses, leading our lives of quiet desperation, thinking that, oh, when we retire, or oh, when the kids get into school, or when the kids get out of school, or when I get this new job, or when I get this promotion, or when I have a little more money, or when I can get this boat, or when I can get this place by the lake, then. Now is our time. Now is our time. But we're caught up in this culture that promises happiness through philosophies like individualism, what's in it for me? Hedonism, if it feels good, do it. Minimalism, what is the least I can do? We're caught up in this culture that promises happiness through these sorts of philosophies, but where are all the happy people? Where are all the happy people? Where are the people who are thriving? Because that's the question for today. The question for today is, are you thriving or are you just surviving?
It's all about the energy. And I mean, it's not like there's some energy guru out there who's controlling the energy and only giving you a little bit of energy each day. I mean, let me ask you a question. If you owned $1 million racehorse, would you let your $1 million racehorse eat at McDonald's? I don't think so. I don't think so at all. And not only that, if you own $1 million racehorse, I'm going to assume you don't own your $1 million racehorse just so you can look at it. I'm going to assume you own $1 million racehorse. You want your $1 million racehorse to win a race. So when you're training your $1 million racehorse to get ready for the big race, which you want it to win, are you going to let your $1 million racehorse eat McDonald's? Of course you're not. Why? Because you know it's not good for your $1 million racehorse to eat McDonald's. You know your $1 million racehorse won't get the energy it needs to win the race from McDonald's. You wouldn't disrespect your $1 million racehorse by feeding him McDonald's. But you and me, Temple of the Holy Spirit, straight through the drive-thru. It's all about the energy, and it's not like there's some energy guru out there who's controlling it and just giving us a little. 90% of our happiness and 90% of our misery comes from our own choices. And in those choices, we choose the best version of ourselves or some second-rate version of ourselves. In every choice, we choose happiness or we choose misery. In every choice, we choose to create energy or to waste energy.
Are you thriving or are you just surviving? Because as I look around the modern world, I see an awful lot of people just hanging on. I see an awful lot of people just getting by. And I've got to believe that God wants more than that for us. I've got to believe that God created us to thrive. Jesus said in John's Gospel, chapter 10, verse 10, I have come so that you may have life and have it more abundantly. I have come so that you may have life and have it to the fullest. Do we have that life? And if we don't have that life, what happened? Where is it? Where is the abundant life that God promises us, that He calls us to, that He desires for us, even more deeply than we desire for ourselves? Where is it, and what's stopping us? What's preventing us from having it, from living it, from experiencing it? Maybe if we have a quick look at our current culture, we might find some of the answers. What sort of a world do we live in? Well, see if this sums it up. We have taller buildings, but shorter tempers. Wider freeways, but narrower viewpoints. We spend more, but have less. We buy more, but enjoy it less. We have bigger houses and smaller families, more conveniences, but less time. We have more degrees, but less common sense. More knowledge, but less judgment. More experts, but more problems. More medicine, but less wellness. We drink too much, smoke too much, spend too recklessly, laugh too little, drive too fast, get too angry too quickly, stay up too late, get up too tired, read too seldom, watch TV too much, and we pray too little. We've multiplied our possessions but reduced our values. We talk too much, love too seldom, and lie too often. We've learned how to make a living but not a life. We've added years to life but not life to years. We've been all the way to the moon and back, but we have trouble crossing the street to meet the new neighbor. We've been all the way to the moon and back, but we have trouble crossing the street to meet the new neighbor. Is this the world we live in? Yes or yes? Yes. And something is amiss. Something is missing here. Something is wrong here. You know it, I know it, God knows it. The question is, what are we going to do about it? The biggest lie in history is the idea things will change. We hear it all the time from politicians. They say, don't worry about it, it's just a phase. Things will change. But the reality is things don't change. People have to change them. Things don't change. People have to change them. And so often you and I, we get caught up in the day-to-day drudgery of life. So often you and I, we get caught up in the hustle and bustle of life. We tell ourselves, oh, it's just a phase. It will change. But before you know it, you're being carried along the river of the culture faster and faster than ever before. You don't know how to get out. You don't know how to get off. You don't know how to stop it. And you sense that something is wrong. You sense that something is missing. You have this sense within you that there is a restlessness that needs to be settled, but you don't know how to do it. You don't know when to do it. You don't know where to do it. You just know you have to do it because it can't keep going on the way it's been going on. And that's where so many of us find ourselves in this modern culture. And that's where God's ageless invitation comes in. Have you ever noticed that everything in creation has rhythm? You ever noticed everything in creation has rhythm? The tides, they come in, they go out to a rhythm. The sun rises and sets to a rhythm. The planets and the stars, they move to a rhythm. Your heart pumps blood through your body to a rhythm. Plants grow based on the process of photosynthesis, based on a rhythm. And ultimately, a woman's body is based on rhythms. And the rhythms of a woman's body give forth new life. Everything in creation has rhythm. And where there's rhythm, there's harmony, efficiency, effectiveness, health, happiness, peace, and prosperity. Where there's rhythm, God's blueprint for creation, rhythm. And where there's rhythm, there's harmony, efficiency, effectiveness, health, happiness, peace, and prosperity. But if you destroy the rhythm, if you take the rhythm out of any element of life, what happens? Chaos, confusion, destruction, disorder. Take the rhythm out of the tides of the oceans. What happens? Chaos, confusion, destruction, disorder. The same is true for every element of creation. But think about your own life. Think about your own life. Which set of words best describes your life? Peace, harmony, efficiency, effectiveness, health, happiness, prosperity? Or chaos, confusion, destruction, disorder? Harmony, efficiency, effectiveness, health, happiness, peace, prosperity? Or chaos, confusion, destruction, disorder?
You see, the problem is, the most important things are hardly ever urgent. When was the last time you woke up and said to yourself, you know what, I urgently have to get on the treadmill today and get some exercise? The most important things are hardly ever urgent. The things that cause you to become the best version of yourself, physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, they're never on your urgent to-do list. The problem is, the most important things are hardly ever urgent, and the most important things are never convenient. I mean, when was the last time your little brother or little sister needed you to help with something and it was convenient? And when was the last time your son or your daughter or your spouse needed urgently to spend some time with you or to discuss something and it was convenient? The most important things, they're never urgent, and the most important things are never convenient. That's why we need to begin to build a life with our legitimate needs in mind. That's why we need to begin to build a life with the best version of ourselves in mind. That's why we need to begin to make our choices with the best version of ourselves in mind. That's why we need to begin to build a life that places our essential purpose to become the best version of ourselves at the center of our lives.
You see, the modern lifestyle has swung out of control. We've lost the rhythm of life. And in losing the rhythm of life, we've sent our lives and our culture into this spiral of chaos, confusion, destruction, disorder. And God's invitation to us is simply to return to the blueprint of creation, to the rhythm of life, to put the rhythm of life back into our culture, back into our lives, back into our families. Because the fruits of this rhythm are the things we desire: health, happiness, peace, prosperity, harmony, efficiency, effectiveness. Which of these things don't we want? Which of these things don't we want? Harmony, efficiency, effectiveness, health, happiness, peace, prosperity. These are the things we desire in our lives. These are the things we desire in our lives. But somewhere along the way, we got busy. We got busy. I mean, do you ever get the feeling, maybe it's just me, but do you ever get the feeling like you just need a day off? Yes or yes? You get the feeling like if you could have a day off, you could get your stuff together, right? And if you could get your stuff together, what would happen? There'd be more harmony in your life, you'd be more effective, you'd be more efficient, you'd be healthier, you'd be happier, you'd be more peaceful, you'd be more prosperous. If you could just get your stuff together, if you could just get organized in your life. You need a day off, you know? God thought of it first, you know? He called it Sunday, you know? Yeah, we read in Genesis, we read about the creation of the world. The first day, God begins to create the world. Second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth day, God finishes creating the world. The seventh day, what does God do on the seventh day? He rests. Because he was exhausted, right? You know, he just finished creating the whole universe. You know? Must have been exhausted. Wrong. God's a pure spirit. He doesn't experience fatigue. He doesn't experience exhaustion. So why did he rest? Why did he rest on the seventh day? Not because he needed to rest, but because he foresaw our need for rest. And in foreseeing our need for rest, he created the seventh day as a day of rest, as a day of renewal, as a day of reflection. Not for his sake, for our sake. Not to help him, to help us. Not to make him happy, to allow us to share in his happiness. You see, God has no egotistical need for us all to fall down before him and worship him at 10 o'clock every Sunday morning. It doesn't help him, it helps us. It's not designed to help him, it's designed to help us. It's not designed to make him happy, it's designed to allow us to share in his happiness. God is not some tyrannical figure who's trying to control us or manipulate us or force us to do things we don't want to do or just purposely make us miserable. He's created us for happiness. He's calling out to us constantly. We just won't listen. We need a day off. We need a day off. Call it Sunday. Call it Sunday. What are you going to do on a Sunday? Well, spend some time with your family, you know. Come down to church, you know. Visit an old friend. Write in your journal. Take an afternoon nap. Eat a nice big bowl of chocolate ice cream. Sing, dance, swim, run. Take a long walk in a quiet place. Dance arm in arm. Listen to some music. Listen to some music. Does everyone know a song? Does everyone know a song that they can listen to that one song, they can sit down and listen to that one song, and that one song has the power just to change the way they feel? Their whole mood? Yes or yes? Well, when was the last time you sat down and just listened to that song? Not while you're driving, not while you're cooking, not while you're gardening, not while you're doing 1,000 other things, but just sat down and just allowed that song to reach into your life, to touch you, to heal you, to inspire you in the way you already know it can, in the way you already know it has the power to do. Listen to that song. Eat another big bowl of chocolate ice cream. Speak your love. Write a love letter. Go to an art gallery. Visit a museum. See a show. Watch a movie. Make some music. Speak your love again. Encourage a child. Fulfill a dream. Sit your spouse down and say, which one of your dreams got lost along the way while I was too busy pursuing mine? Rediscover one of his or her dreams. Spend some time with children. If you have children, make some memories, because they grow up like that. Make Sunday memory-making day. If you don't have children, go and sit in the playground and watch the children play. Dostoevsky, the famous Russian novelist, wrote, "The soul is healed by being with children." The soul is healed by being with children. Spend some time with children. Eat another big bowl of chocolate ice cream. Speak your love again. These are the things that bring us to life. Get a little bit of exercise. Plant a garden. These are the things that bring us to life, that invigorate our lives, that energize us and bring enthusiasm to our lives. But these are the things we're constantly putting off. These are the things we're constantly neglecting. The things that we have a legitimate need for while we're off chasing our illegitimate wants, our illegitimate desires. Constantly setting aside the things we need. And if you take that one day off, you set that one day aside just to do these things, your whole life will change. Why? Because you return the rhythm to your life. Just by creating that sacred day, just by setting the seventh day aside as a sacred time, to be renewed, to be refreshed, to reflect, you just naturally create that rhythm. Where there's rhythm, there's harmony. Where there's harmony, there's efficiency. There's efficiency, there's effectiveness, health, happiness, peace, prosperity. The fruits of the rhythm. The fruits. I know what some of you are thinking. Some of you are thinking you can't possibly take Sundays off. Okay, well, let's be realistic. Let's be realistic. We live in a modern culture. We need some people to work on a Sunday. We need doctors. We need nurses. We need pastors. We need some people to work on a Sunday. If you're one of those people, create another day. Find another day. Make it Wednesday. Make it Thursday. But create that day of rest, renewal, reflection. And try and make it the same day every week, because by doing that, you'll create the rhythm. You'll create the rhythm. And where there's rhythm, there's harmony, efficiency, effectiveness, health, happiness, peace, prosperity. And that's what our lives are crying out for, a little bit of simplicity, a little bit of the original blueprint, a little bit of the original blueprint. God's creation, all based on a rhythm, all based. But how did we end up here? I mean, how did we end up here with our lives so busy, so noisy, so distracted? I don't know, it must have been, before I was born, someone invented the 40-hour week, and they invented the 40-hour week, and they said, all right, from now on, everyone's got to go off and they've got to work for 5 days of the week. And we said to them, all right, if we do that, can we have a little bit of money and have 2 days off? They say, yeah, if you do that, you can have a little bit of money and have 2 days off, So we said, all right, we'll do it. I don't know who it was that invented it. It's a funny thing, things that we slip out of in history, things that we let go of in history, the things that we forget in history. It's a funny thing. Like, who invented the 40-hour week? Like, you go to the history books, there's no recollection of it. It must have been a committee. Yeah? Yeah, watch out for those committees. Trust me. So anyway, they get their committee together. They invent the 40-hour week. Then they come back to us and they say, we've decided that from now on, everyone needs to take 5 days a week to do just about everything. That means just about nothing to just about nobody, just about anywhere, and will mean even less to anyone 100 years from now. And we say to them, if we do that, we have a little bit of money and 2 days off. They say, yep. And we say, all right, we'll buy it. So a few years later, they had another committee meeting. They came back to us again. They said, listen, we've had another committee meeting, and we've decided, in your best interest, of course, that from now on, we need everyone to take 6 days a week to do just about everything. That means just about nothing to just about nobody, just about anywhere, or mean even less to anyone 100 years from now. And we say, all right, if we do that, can we have a little bit more money? They say, yeah, you can have a little bit more money. We say, all right, we'll do it. And then a few years after that, they came back to us again. They came back to us again. They said, listen, we've had another committee meeting, and we've decided, in your best interest, of course, that from now on, we need everyone to throw their whole lives into complete chaos and take 7 days a week to do just about everything that means just about nothing to just about nobody, just about anywhere, and will mean even less to anyone 100 years from now. And we say, why? And they say, well, we've decided that it's absolutely imperative that people be able to buy their groceries at 3:30 in the morning, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year. And we say, yeah, we can see that. That makes a lot of sense. And so we buy that too. We throw our lives completely into chaos, confusion, destruction, disorder. We buy the whole deal. We buy the whole deal. And that is how we end up here. That is how we end up right here in this world so obsessed with speed, noise, so distracted, so disheveled, hungry for a little bit of simplicity, desperate to rediscover God's original blueprint, the rhythm of life. The rhythm of life. How do we do it? Not complicated. Not complicated. Our lives change when our habits change. Our lives change when our habits change. One habit, take Sundays off. Take Sundays off. Create Sunday as a day of rest, renewal, reflection. You do that one thing, your whole life will change. You know it, I know it, God knows it. You do that one thing. Our lives change when our habits change. It's not freak luck, and God doesn't have any favorites. Our lives change when our habits change. You do that one thing, take Sundays off, your life will change. 6 weeks from now, be completely different. Now the danger, the temptation is to say, I can't possibly take Sundays off. I got all these things I need to do on a Sunday. All these things that I don't get done during the week. I got to do them on a Sunday. I can't possibly take Sunday off. Well, here's my promise. You take Sundays off, and I promise you, you will get more done in 6 days than you ever got done in 7 days. You take your Sundays off, and I promise you, you will get more done in 6 days than you ever got done in 7 days. Why? Because where there's rhythm, there's harmony. Where there's harmony, there's efficiency, effectiveness, health, happiness, peace, prosperity. Take your Sundays. Take your Sundays. When you get up on a Sunday morning, or when you go to bed on a Saturday night, just ask yourself, where's a good place to start? Where's a good place to start? Look at the 4 areas of your life: physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual. Before you go to bed on a Saturday, or when you wake up on a Sunday morning, ask yourself, what is one thing in each of these areas that I can do on this day that will help me become the best version of myself? What is one thing, physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, that I can do on this day that will help me become the best version of myself? Write them down, get up on a Sunday, and do those things. Do the things that nourish you. Do the things that nurture you. Do the things that help you become the best version of yourself. Our lives change when our habits change. You take Sundays off, 6 weeks from now, there'll be more harmony, efficiency, effectiveness, health, happiness, peace, prosperity in your life than you ever imagined. And you will wonder, how did I ever live without this? You'll wonder, how did we ever get away from this simple wisdom? You'll wonder, how did we ever get away from the beauty of this plan that God has created for us? Not to help Him or to serve Him, created the plan to help us, to lead us to be all we can be, to become the best version of ourselves. Our lives change when our habits change. Take Sundays off. See if that one new habit doesn't have the power to change your life. See if that one new habit doesn't change just about everything else in your life. But how do we do it? It takes a little bit of discipline. Like everything else worth having, takes a little bit of discipline. But this particular discipline requires mastery of the English language and a particular aspect of the English language. In order to take Sundays off, you have to learn how to say this magical phrase. I want you to say it after me now. No. No. See, I can see you're struggling with that. I can see you're really having a bit of a problem with that. You see, most of us, we don't know how to say no. Why? Because we don't have any deeper yeses. When we're faced with a decision, we don't ask ourselves, if I walk this path, is this going to help me become the best version of myself? We don't ask ourselves that. We ask ourselves, oh, if I say no, I wonder what they'll think. Oh, if I say no, I wonder, will they talk to me anymore? Oh, if I say no to going to the football this week, maybe they'll never invite me again. Oh, if I say no to this, maybe they'll think this of me or this of my friends. Or we ask all the wrong questions. Instead of asking ourselves, if I do that this Sunday, is that going to help me become the best version of myself? We say, oh, I wonder what they'll think about me. Because we don't have the deeper yes. We don't have the direction. We're not oriented in the path. We're not walking the path towards becoming the best version of ourselves. Because when we are, every time someone asks us to do something, we get into the habit of asking ourselves, is that going to help me become the best version of myself? Because the best thing you can do for yourself is become the best version of yourself. The best thing you can do for your spouse is become the best version of yourself. The best thing you can do for your boyfriend or your girlfriend is become the best version of yourself. The best thing you can do for your children is become the best version of yourself. The best thing you can do for your community, for your church, for your nation, for the world is become the best version of yourself. Because when people are striving to become the best version of themselves, they change the world. When people are striving to become the best version of themselves, they change the world.
The best thing you can do for yourself is become the best version of yourself. The best thing you can do with your life is to put your focus, spend all your time, all your effort, all your energy focusing on becoming the best version of yourself. And what does it take? Discipline. But our culture despises discipline. Our culture despises discipline. We want someone to get on the television and tell us that we can be happy without discipline. I mean, just look at the diet industry. Americans spent $30 billion last year on diet products. And the only diet most of us need is a little bit of discipline. The only diet most of us need is a little bit of discipline. But we don't want any discipline. We want someone to get on the television set and tell us if we take this little pill twice a day, every day, we can eat whatever we want, wherever we want, as much as we want, and we'll look like a supermodel. And if it's not the guy with the pill, it's this other woman with the little mat saying, you know, if you just lay down on this little mat 20 minutes twice a week, you'll look like a supermodel. You can eat whatever you want, wherever you want, as much as you want, and you'll look fantastic. Just go on, lay on down. Just lay on down on this little mat twice a week. We say, 1-800-WHAT? $30 billion. The only diet most of us need is a little bit of discipline. But you know what we want? We want someone to get on the television screen and tell us that we can be happy without discipline. And we can't. It's a lie, it's a myth, it's a miscredited fantasy. Truth be told, if you want to measure the level of happiness in your life, measure the level of discipline in your life. The more discipline you bring to your life, the happier you'll be. Discipline and happiness are directly related to one another in our lives.
What does God want from you? What does God want for you? What's God's vision for you? What's God's dream for you? Is that you make this journey, that you become and reach out and strive to become the best version of yourself. The best version of yourself. And how does it happen? By stepping back every now and then, reflecting, allowing yourself to be renewed, nurtured, getting a look at the big picture. Getting a look at the big picture. Because when we're absorbed in the culture, it's difficult to get a look at the big picture. You know, if I take my hand and I put it right here, what can you see? If I put it right here, what can you see?
Your hand.
Excellent. If I step back here, what can you see?
Your whole self.
My whole self. My whole self. See, most of us, we're wandering around in the culture. We're wandering around the culture like this. We don't know where we're going. We don't know what we're doing. And you know, when you're in a dark room, you know when you walk into a room that is absolutely dark, you're scared to walk around, aren't you? You don't walk around confidently. You don't move confidently and quickly. You're scared to walk around, and that's what most people's lives are like. Because we're so absorbed in the culture, we can't see anything. We spoke yesterday about stepping back for that 10 minutes a day in the classroom of silence. What does that do? It helps us see, oh, that's just a hand. But what does Sundays do? It helps us to step back from the culture and say, that's my whole self. That's my whole self. And that's what we need. We need to step back because it gives perspective. It gives perspective to ourselves, to our lives, to the world around us, and to the people we share this wonderful experience we call life with. We need to step back from the hustle and bustle, from the day-to-day drudgery of life. Otherwise, we will almost certainly end up numbered amongst Henry David Thoreau's masses, leading our lives of quiet desperation. Once upon a time, there was an investment banker. He lived in New York City. He made tons of money, was phenomenally successful. But he had a very busy, noisy, stressful life. So once a year, he used to leave New York City and go down to a small coastal village in Mexico for 2 weeks. And for 2 weeks, he would rest, he would relax, he would allow himself to be renewed, allow himself to be refreshed. And then, when the 2 weeks were over, he would go back to his crazy, noisy, busy life. Well, one day, he was down in this small coastal village. He was standing out on the pier around lunchtime, looking out to sea, and he noticed that a small fishing boat was coming into dock. He thought this was strange because most of the fishermen used to stay out most of the day, catch as many fish as they could, and come in late in the afternoon, clean and prepare the fish for market. So he was curious. He walked over to where the fishing boat was about to dock, and he looked into the small fishing boat, and he noticed that there was just one fisherman and several large yellowfin tuna fish. He congratulated the fisherman on his catch, and then he said to the fisherman, "How long did it take you to catch those fish?" Fisherman smiled. He said, "Not very long." The American said, "Well, is there something wrong with your boat?" Fisherman said, "No, nothing wrong with the boat. I've had it 15 years and never had a problem." The American said, "Well, why didn't you stay out there longer and catch more fish?" The Mexican said, "Well, I have plenty for my family's immediate needs. Some of them we can eat, and the others we can sell and get the other things we need." The American said, "Well, it's not even lunchtime. What do you do with the rest of your time?" Fisherman smiled. He said, "Well, I like to sleep late in the mornings. And then, well, then I fish a little, mostly just for the pleasure of fishing. And then I go home, and every afternoon I take siesta with my wife, Maria. And then I play with my children. I have dinner with my families in the evenings. And then when my children are sleeping, I stroll into the village where I sip wine and play guitar with my amigos." The American scoffed. He said, "I am a Harvard MBA, and I can help you." "Really?" said the fisherman. The American said, "Yep, you should fish a little bit longer every day. You should fish a little bit longer every day. You catch more fish, you'd make more money. With the extra money, you could buy a bigger boat. You'd catch even more fish, you'd make even more money, and then you could buy another boat. You could hire another man to fish with that boat, and then you'd really start to make some money. With the fish and the proceeds and the money from the 2 boats, then you could buy another boat, and before you know it, you'd have a whole fleet of boats. And then you could cut out the middleman. You could sell your fish straight to the cannery. Then you'd make more money from that. The fisherman said, but what then? The American said, oh, we're just getting started. Then, as your fleet continues to expand, you can cut out the cannery, and then you can leave this small coastal village. You can move to Mexico City. You can build your own cannery. And then you'll really start to make some money. Fisherman said, but what then? The American said, well, as your fleet continues to expand, then you can begin to ship your fish all down into Asia, up into America. And then when the time is right, you can move to Los Angeles. You can open up a distribution plant there, begin to ship your fish all over America and all into Europe. Fisherman said, but what then? The American said, well, then you can move to New York City. By now, your enterprise will be an empire, and you can live smack in the middle of the business world, and from there, you can manage and control your expanding empire. Fisherman said, well, how long will that take? The American said, well, 20, maybe 25 years. Fisherman said, but what then? The American, his eyes lit up like a Christmas tree. He said, that's the best part. When the time is just right, perfectly right, then you can sell your company's stock to the public. You can go down to Wall Street. You can list your company on the stock exchange. You can make an IPO, and you will make millions and millions and millions of dollars. Fisherman looked at the American. He said, millions. The American said, more money than you ever dreamt you could earn in 100 lifetimes. Fisherman looked at the American. He said, but what then? The American was stumped, didn't know what to say. Thought for a moment, and then a light bulb went off in his head, and he looked at the fisherman, and he said, then you could move to a small coastal village. You could sleep late. You could fish just for the pleasure of fishing. You could take siesta every afternoon with your wife. Play with your children. In the evenings, you could have dinner with your family. And then when you're finished, you could stroll into the village and sip wine and play guitar with your amigos. What are we doing? What are we doing? Our lives crying out for a little bit of order. Our lives crying out for a little bit of simplicity, for a little bit of rhythm. Our lives change when our habits change. You want to be happy? I want to be happy. We all want to be happy. We know the things that make us happy. We just don't do them. We just don't do them. It's got nothing to do with freak luck, and God doesn't have any favorites. It's when you and I decide finally that we will begin to put the simple wisdom that we already know into our lives, then we will begin to live the abundant life that we were created for. Thank you.